I've just realized your lack of heart. I will live with my parents in this house, so please leave. Ever since we got married, Scott, who has always relied on me, is now trying to kick me out of the house. Even though I pay $3,000 a month in rent, I've reached my limit. I had been considering divorce for a while, but Scott's remarks have solidified my decision. I understand. I will leave this house. Yes, get out quickly. I'm going out now. I'll be back tomorrow evening, but please pack your things and leave by then. Are you sure you don't need to check what I'm taking? Don't touch my equipment. You can do whatever you want with the other stuff. It seems I am free to handle the things in the house. In that case, I might need to call a jink removal service. And while I'm at it, I'll make sure Scott gets a taste of his own medicine. I work as a researcher at a major company. Having graduated from graduate school, I am 29 years old, entrusted with a responsible job appropriate for my age, and I have a decent income. As a result, I am able to live in a luxury apartment that costs $3,000 a month in rent. I am also married to Scott, and we live with our son Tyler. From the outside, it might seem like I lead a fulfilling life. There are people who struggle with their living situation or food, or those who are elderly and live alone, so I feel fortunate. Yet, I have my own concerns. The monthly rent of $3,000 is a strain on our budget. My income is decent, but honestly, the $3,000 rent is a significant burden. You're sounding like an old woman again with all your complaining. Scott is the source of my worries. If he worked properly, I wouldn't have to worry about the rent. However, he is a part-time worker dreaming of becoming a musician. He is pursuing a path as a musician but is already 30 years old. Scott used to be somewhat popular and participated in various events. However, entertaining a few hundred people at a live house doesn't provide enough income to make a living, so in reality, he leads an unstable life as a part-timer. When I was younger, I saw him shine as he chased his dreams. Scott, it seems I'm pregnant. Really? Wonderful. I'll work hard for our future child. I was 19 years old when I married him, and we started a family. Getting married meant he would have to give up his dreams of music and choose a life with his family. I had begun to question his perpetual part-time lifestyle, but I felt guilty asking him to give up his dreams for the family. However, my thoughts seemed meaningless. After our child was born, Scott continued his music and part-time jobs. I couldn't tolerate it anymore and warned him. How long do you plan to keep up the part-time jobs? You're nearly 20, you know? People your age are job hunting. I have my own way of living. Please don't compare me to others. Your words sound noble but lack conviction. If you want to speak from such a position, contribute to the household finances first. When I become famous, I'll make up for the earnings I'm missing out on now. Stop being so dreamy and face reality. With that, he had no rebuttal and eventually started a part-time job. Even earning $1,000 a month would be helpful. But Scott didn't stop talking about his dreams. You're being noisy. Times are different now. There are many paths to success without belonging to an agency. So, I'm not just dreaming anymore. It's just that my name isn't widely known yet. Companies have overwhelming power in advertising. However, I am making steady progress, even if it's slow. No matter how much I hear, it's baffling. When will he realize that it's all an illusion? Scott's band has already disbanded, and the former members have either married or found jobs. I think Scott should follow their example. Yet, Scott says, "You've given up your dreams." That's pathetic. I think giving up dreams to protect the family is a meaningful choice. But is that wrong? When I was pregnant, Scott said he would work hard for our child, but it seems he meant continuing his music career. However, I hope that once our child grew a bit more, Scott would see reality. Did you buy expensive clothes again? Appearance is important for my job. He hasn't earned a single dollar from music, yet what is he talking about? 10 years have passed since our child was born, and Scott is still a part-timer as he approaches his 30s. Despite a long music career, he sees himself as mid-tier without any notable success or achievements, which has led to increased spending on expensive clothes and music equipment. I wish you would contribute a bit to the household instead of spending money on such things. You can satisfy hunger with pretense, you know? What do you mean by such things? These are necessary for me. Since Scott always has this attitude, we frequently argue. To avoid showing our child the arguments, we choose times when he's not at home to talk, or we move to another room if possible. But the house is small, so our child inevitably hears us if our voices get loud. Therefore, we are considering moving to a bigger house. As our son grows, our current residence will definitely become too cramped. Hey, Tyler is 10 now, and this apartment is too cramped, so shall we move? Yeah, this was originally the house you lived in alone, after all. What? Do you have a complaint? You moved into my house when we got married, right? It's not a complaint. I'd like to move, preferably to a bigger house. Living in a high-rise condo would be cool, I think. What? Who do you think will pay the rent? I will contribute to the household too. I can handle the rent, but I'll help with electricity, gas, and groceries. Please, I really want to live in a high-rise condo. It should be possible to live in a high-rise condominium with my salary. Moreover, it's heartening that Scott, who has never contributed to our finances, has offered to help. This might be the trigger for him to face reality. By paying for electricity and gas, he might understand the daily struggles and the value of money. Okay, I'll look for a place then. I'll pay the rent, so no complaints about the property I choose. Agreed. Anything is okay if it's in a high-rise condo. I leave it all up to you. Despite these hopes, living in the high-rise condo began with Scott ultimately betraying my expectations again. A year after moving, Scott is still pursuing music at 30 and has not kept any of the promises he made when we moved. Hey, the gas bill has arrived. Please pay it before it's debited from my account. I'll give it to you next time. I don't have it right now. When is next time? You always say that, but then you don't pay. You're always fussing about money. Is money really that important? All I asked for was the minimum amount necessary for our living expenses. Why should I have to be scolded? He was supposed to have promised to pay in the first place. It was a good decision to set up direct debits from my own account. Otherwise, Scott might never have paid the electricity and gas bills. Sometimes, however, Scott does pay some money. What? There's $50 on the living room table. It was left by Scott, but he isn't home now. $50 is nowhere near enough. But I thought he left this amount to avoid handing it over directly to me, perhaps out of embarrassment. Is he showing some consideration? There's something endearing about that. It seems I was mistaken to think so. I haven't received this month's electricity bill payment yet. I pay it sometimes, don't I? It seems he only wants to feel like he's paying by occasionally handing over a few tens of dollars. To top it off, he lies and asks for money. I want to take my parents on a trip. Can you lend me some money? Okay, will $50 be enough? I appreciate it. Scott sometimes tells lies, but I know it's a sign that he wants some pocket money. He also knows that I understand he's asking for pocket money. Because of this, our conversations can be hard to understand when he asks for money. Such exchanges happen frequently because he often asks me for money. He probably uses the pocket money to treat his juniors or to show off. The rent is still $3,000 this month. It's tough. The rent for the high-rise condo we moved to is $3,000, which is certainly not cheap. I thought moving to a high-rise condo might motivate Scott to work, but he always disappoints me, and I have been struggling with the rent for 3 years. I can save money in this situation. Ideally, I'd like to use money for more meaningful purposes, like our child's future or for retirement. I've considered divorce before, but it seems it's time to seriously think about it. Then Scott made a remark that made me decide on divorce. Hey, we have an unused room, right? I was thinking of clearing it out and making it into a room for my parents. What do you think? A room for your parents, as in living together? What brought this on all of a sudden? My parents are getting older, so we can't just leave them be. His words sound noble, but Scott lacks the ability to follow through. Who does he think is paying the rent for this high-rise condo? Moreover, I'm also bearing the cost of living expenses and our son's education. Furthermore, the idea of being forced to live with my in-laws is absolutely unacceptable. I'm absolutely opposed. You don't need to answer so quickly. Think about it a bit. I oppose. Why are you so firm? What's wrong with filial piety? Are you telling me to abandon my parents? You're heartless. If you only hear this conversation, it might seem like I am selfishly refusing to live with them. But that's not the case. The problem is entirely with Scott. If we start living together, I can clearly see a future where he dumps all the responsibility for his parents on me. So I firmly refuse. I absolutely cannot live together. I see how heartless you are. I will live in this house with my parents, so you need to leave. Ever since we got married, Scott has been dependent on me, and now he's trying to kick me out of the house. Even though I'm paying $3,000 a month in rent, I want to make him aware of his helplessness and lack of achievements. He ordered me out of the house with unreasonable anger. I've reached my limit. I had been considering divorce for a while, but Scott's remarks have solidified my decision. Understood. I will leave this house. Yes, get out quickly. I'm going out now. I'll be back tomorrow evening, but please pack your things and leave by then. Are you sure you don't need to check what I'm taking? Don't touch my equipment. You can do whatever you want with the other stuff. Scott left the house after his final remark. It seems I am free to handle the things in the house. Mom, I'll help you. And I'll go with you, too. Thank you. My son came out of his room and offered words of comfort. Whenever there was a marital dispute, our son always went to another room. Creating a situation that makes our child feel the need to be cautious is heartbreaking for me as a parent. Our 13-year-old son used to enjoy playing with his father and liked him a lot when he was younger and didn't understand the situation. But from upper elementary school, he began to grasp the situation and started supporting me. Where should we start cleaning up? Tyler, start with your own things. I have something else I want to do. What? A scheme? I just want to give him a little shock. I took out my cell phone and called a specific place. Hello, I'm sorry for the urgency, but could you please help us tomorrow? After we finished organizing, my son and I decided to stay temporarily in a business hotel with only the essentials. We'll have to look for a new place to live. That night, knowing that Scott would call, we placed my smartphone on the table and quietly waited for the call. The smartphone rang and we looked at each other before I answered. Hey, what's going on here? What are you doing? What do you mean? What's the problem? Seeing Scott's panic, my son and I couldn't help but laugh. All my clothes and equipment are here, but everything else is gone. What happened to the tables and the fridge? Did you take them? No, I arranged for a junk removal service to dispose of everything. By now, it might already be burned. Tyler, are you there too? When my son intervened and spoke up, Scott was even more surprised. He probably didn't realize that Tyler was still at home and was shocked by the nearly empty house. What do you mean everything is disposed of? These furniture and appliances, I bought them, right? Well, they could be considered marital property. You said I could do whatever I wanted with everything except your equipment, so I just did that. But how am I supposed to live now? If you need to, you can just buy new ones. For now, why not use your amp as a chair or wrap a towel around your guitar for a pillow? That's not funny. To do such a nasty thing. We're getting a divorce. Yes, I understand. What? Scott probably thought I would be at least a little shaken by the mention of divorce. He might have also thought that this was just part of another marital argument. But I had already considered divorce, and his words held no threat for me. In fact, I was almost grateful that he brought it up. Really? You understand? We're getting a divorce, a divorce. You don't need to say it multiple times. I understand. I deliberately responded in a calm and cold tone. This should convey that I am serious about the divorce. Scott must realize that he would be the one to suffer from the divorce. Therefore, when he impulsively mentioned divorce and I accepted it, he clearly panicked. Yes, that's right. Scott seemed too flustered to find his next words. Normally, he would apologize and back down. However, perhaps due to his nature as a musician, he can't take back what he said. I know this character trait all too well. Once, I found that attitude appealing, but now it just seems ridiculous. We'll discuss the details of the divorce later, but you're planning to live with your parents in that house, right? Should I go to the real estate agent first to review the contract? Yeah. If the contract is changed to my name, the divorce cannot be undone. This is your chance to apologize. Well, maybe. It might have been a desperate attempt to resist, but Scott's voice was trembling. He might think that throwing out the furniture and appliances was my plan to move towards divorce. However, the grievances built up over 13 years of marriage won't just disappear so easily. I wish Scott would struggle a bit more. A few days later, Scott and I went to the real estate office to review the contract for the condo. My procedure is now complete. I was able to smoothly terminate the contract. However, when Scott tried to sign a new contract, a problem arose. What? The rent is $3,000? Scott's face turned pale. When I had made the contract for the high-rise condo, he had left everything from selecting the property to the contracting process up to me, and he was unaware of the details. It's impossible to pay such high rent. Even if I include my father and mother, he was astonished. What a situation. It seems that after I left, Scott planned to seek financial support from his parents. He thought that the three of them could somehow manage the rent, but the actual rent was beyond his expectations. Since the in-laws are pensioners and Scott himself is a non-regular employee, I foresaw that it would be difficult for the three of them to share the costs and make payments. Really? You've been paying this for a year? Scott asked, and I replied, yes, I've been paying this amount all along. Since you don't work, we haven't been able to save anything. I can handle such a contract. Don't worry. I don't think you can handle the contract, I responded. What do you mean? He seemed confused. He appeared to be so flustered that he had completely forgotten the rules for renting a home. I asked the real estate agent to help Scott understand the situation. Excuse me, is it possible for someone with an irregular income of $1,200 per month to sign a contract for this property? The parents will pay the shortfall. No, that would be a bit difficult. The applicant needs to have a certain level of income. See, I told you that you wouldn't be able to pass the screening, I said. The agent, hearing our conversation, probably sensed that we were going to part ways. He responded to my questions with a wry smile, unable to say much. So, what should I do now? If you can't make the contract, you have no choice but to leave, right? There are no other options since I've already canceled that contract. Wow, you've done something ridiculous again. Scott, who calls himself an artist, has an unnecessarily high self-esteem and likes to show off. It must have been a huge embarrassment for him, with his low income and a looming divorce, to be manipulated by me and to have others know about his situation. His face was drenched in sweat and as red as if he had just run a full marathon in midsummer. Ignoring my husband, I continued talking to the agent. It seems that things didn't go as planned, and the contract is impossible now. We need to move out immediately, right? I'm sorry for the confusion, but there's hardly any belongings left, just some clothes and music equipment. It's a small enough amount to clean up quickly. So could you check the procedures for moving out later? You knew I didn't understand the rent or the conditions of the house, and you still went ahead with this? Scott said, "What do you mean? When I asked if you wanted to review the contract, you said you would handle it yourself. Whether you can fulfill the contract is not my concern." I replied, "Don't lie. You know about my income," Scott said. "I was hoping there might be a way for the contract to succeed," I answered. "Don't joke. I'm not leaving here." Scott insisted. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police. I don't know the legal details, but you might be sued for trespassing or failure to vacate. Oh, and since this isn't my property anymore, the real estate agency or the owner might take some action. It could get messy if a company reports it," I said. The agent looked on worriedly. I truly felt sorry for causing inconvenience. "You don't want to be embarrassed any further, right? Go home now and pack your things," I told Scott. Scott left the real estate office without saying a word. "I'm sorry. The house will be empty soon. If anything is left, I'll take responsibility for disposing of it," I said. Later, when the agent and I went to the house, it was already empty. Later, to apologize for the inconvenience, I brought sweets to the real estate office. The procedure itself would be fine if handled well, but the agent seemed confused by the very awkward situation. I am truly sorry. However, this brought the dreamy musician back to the real world. Now, he must strive to do well in the real world. After he left the house, our divorce was officially finalized. My ex-husband had no financial leeway, and since I had spent most of my money on rent, there was no dispute over the division of assets. My son chose to stay with me. My ex-husband might have sought support from his parents, but I had already blocked that path. After about 10 years of marriage, I informed my in-laws of the divorce and made my greetings. I thought it was only natural to communicate this process to my in-laws. Upon learning of my ex-husband's past actions, my in-laws decided to distance themselves from him and to withhold support until he finds a job and becomes independent. As a result, the plan for my ex-husband to live with his parents was canceled. Therefore, my ex-husband could no longer rely on his parents. Over 30 years old and having lived as a freelancer, it is difficult for him to find regular employment, and he is still working as a freelancer. His income remains low, and he struggles even to pay the rent for a cheap apartment. Under these circumstances, continuing music is almost impossible. This is the reality of my ex-husband, who achieved nothing. I have rented a new apartment and am living there with my son. After my husband left, the rent decreased, allowing me to utilize my funds more beneficially. While I don't deny the pursuit of dreams, living comfortably with my son under the current circumstances is what makes me happiest. The reason our household is struggling financially is because someone isn't employed, you know. While saying this, my mother-in-law glared at me sternly. Both my husband and my father-in-law tried to intervene and calm my mother-in-law down, but her anger only grew. "It's because we have an extra person here that the house is struggling financially. Being a housewife is essentially the same as being unemployed. Do you understand?" With those words, my mother-in-law blamed me. However, more than feeling sad or angry, I just felt tired of my mother-in-law. It's been a year since I started living with my in-laws, and I've been blamed like this by her many times before. My dedication to my family at home is something my mother-in-law just can't seem to accept. I believe that maintaining the household is an important role and is certainly not worthless. But the reality is that my mother-in-law does not see its value. It's incredibly frustrating that such misunderstandings occur, but I strongly feel that I must overcome this situation in my own way. One day, my mother-in-law was different from usual. Apparently, something upsetting happened outside, and because of that, she was even harsher towards me than usual. As time passed, my mother-in-law became more agitated and eventually said something unbelievable. "It's wrong that you're with my precious son. You're unemployed now, and you should live a more independent life. Get out now." My husband and father-in-law were shocked. They had not expected my mother-in-law to tell me to leave so directly and were at a loss for words. My father-in-law seemed like he wanted to say something, but I spoke up first. "Oh, of course, with pleasure," I replied with a smile as bright as the morning sun. My mother-in-law was taken aback by my unexpected response and exclaimed in surprise, "What?" The atmosphere was so comical, like a scene from a TV show. My husband and father-in-law were also surprised. Their faces were filled with the pure astonishment of children seeing a rare animal. While they were unsure how to react to my unexpected move, I went back to my room and began packing my bags for a new beginning. As if to mark the start of this new chapter, I took out the divorce papers. When it was time for my husband to sign the divorce papers, he hesitated slightly, and his hand shook a bit with the pen. "Mother, I'll take these divorce papers to the court." "Take care of yourself," I said as I prepared myself to step into a new future. As I did, my mother-in-law's laughter came from the back of the house, but my heart had already moved on from the past and was filled with hope for the future. "It won't go as you think," I muttered to myself as I began to envision my new life. "My name's Sherry." Even now at 30, my love for movies and dramas since childhood hasn't faded. I was passionate about following the stories on the screen back then, and narrating stories through visuals has become my passion. This passion led me to a film production school right after graduating from high school. The knowledge and skills I acquired there became a great asset in my career in the advertising industry, where I joined an advertising agency. Though busy, my days were filled with the joy of creativity. And during those days, through my work, I met Jem. He was 2 years older than me, and I was immediately drawn to his relaxed demeanor and generous heart. Sharing our love for cameras together was a special joy. On the common ground of video, we quickly built a close relationship. Our relationship naturally deepened over several years of dating, and eventually, a significant word from him reached me. "Sherry, I think I'll go back to my hometown and become an independent photographer." "Really? You've decided to become independent?" I had heard from Jim before that he eventually wanted to return to his hometown and become independent. "Yeah. So, would you come back to my hometown with me? I mean, would you marry me?" His inquiry revealed both his determination for the future and a hint of anxiety. "Of course. Thank you." I accepted his offer with genuine joy. Since Jem's hometown is accessible by train from here, I will be quitting my job at my current company. Deciding to follow him, even at the cost of leaving my job, came with its share of loneliness and anxiety. But the overwhelming sense of anticipation and hope filled my heart to support the dreams of the person I love and to carve out a new future together. Our new story is about to begin. The time I spend with Jim is so precious to me, it's indescribable. Our marriage has led to daily appreciation of our joy together. And I became a full-time homemaker while Jim began to build a new career with his camera. He worked hard. We rented an apartment near his parents' home and saved money to build our own house in the future. Living modestly, our dreams slowly but surely took shape. However, a suggestion from my mother-in-law disturbed our peaceful daily life. "Sherry, Jem, it's wonderful that you two are saving diligently for the future. But if you live here with us, you could save even more," my mother-in-law said, her eyes gleaming like a child dreaming. Although we had a good relationship with my in-laws, this proposal swirled complex emotions within us. It might be financially beneficial indeed. But, recalling the struggles of a friend who lived with in-laws immediately after marriage and ended up divorcing, I felt uneasy. Jim, sensing my feelings, gently refused, saying, "Mom, I appreciate it, but we value our privacy too. We'd like to think more about living together." However, my mother-in-law's enthusiasm did not wane. "I think living together will make every day more fun. I dream every night of us enjoying meals together." "It's time to start living together," she repeatedly suggested. As time passed, her repeated suggestions swayed us. Eventually, we accepted her warm hope. The joy on my mother-in-law's face was as if a long-held dream had come true. Finally, my dream is becoming reality. She thanked us with sparkling eyes. Our new life, filled with such hopeful anticipation, was about to begin. Wow, I'm really happy. Sherry, let's share the household chores together amicably. Thank you, I look forward to it. Seeing my mother-in-law smile, I felt truly glad to have accepted living together. After agreeing to live together, my mother-in-law's calls became more frequent, conveying her eagerness to live together. For you two, I've prepared the corner room on the second floor of the house. It's bright as it gets a lot of sunlight, and I think you'll find it comfortable. I've cleaned the room thoroughly and polished it, so please use it comfortably. I truly appreciate your thoughtfulness. I'm deeply grateful. As time passed, I experienced more of my mother-in-law's kind gestures, and the anxiety in my heart gradually eased. Still, a small doubt smoldered deep within me. It was the feeling that my mother-in-law's love for her son, Jim, was sometimes too intense. A mother's love for her son is natural, but sometimes her overprotectiveness perplexed me. Sherry, what are you making for dinner tonight? Jem works hard every day, so make sure he eats lots of nutritious food. Not just meat, but a balanced diet. Support him well. So, what's on the menu? While I appreciated her detailed concern, I couldn't help but feel a slight discomfort. My mother-in-law also began to frequently say, "I can't wait to live with Jim soon." Her words seemed to anticipate living with Jim more than with the entire family. However, a mother's desire to cherish time with her son is understandable. I told myself not to worry excessively. Otherwise, there were no other concerns, so I focused on preparing for the move. And so, our life together began. Initially, sharing household chores with my mother-in-law led to harmonious days, but gradually her unexpected side began to show. One day, with Jim and my father-in-law at work, it was just my mother-in-law and me at home. As morning light streamed through the windows, what should have been a peaceful time suddenly changed. "Sherry, are you still doing laundry? Can't you do it quicker? Once the laundry is done, I'd like you to wash the dishes. I'm leaving the housework to you today. Since you're not working, you must have plenty of time, right? How enviable to have so much free time." My mother-in-law asked in a tone harsher than I'd ever heard. Surprised, yet trying to remain calm, I replied, "Mother, do you have plans to go out today?" However, my mother-in-law responded, "Yes, unlike you, I'm busy." When I was working, every day was very busy. Thinking back to those times still fills my chest. She spoke with pride about her past job. My mother-in-law indeed had a successful career at a major trading company until 2 years ago. She is now a retired housewife and supposed to have a lot of time at home. Yet, why does she look down on me as unemployed? I couldn't understand the reason and couldn't hide my confusion. "What are you spacing out for? Move your hands. Hurry up and finish hanging the laundry." "Yes, yes." Overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's forcefulness, I started doing the household chores as she commanded. My mother-in-law complained about every aspect of the housework, and she wasn't satisfied unless the cleaning was perfect. "This isn't good enough. It's not clean at all. Do it again." She watched with a critical eye. After harassing me to her satisfaction, my mother-in-law left the house with a designer bag in hand. Alone in the house, I was stunned. Gradually, it became a daily routine for my mother-in-law to naturally treat housework as my responsibility. She dressed in trendy clothes and bags, and always returned from her outings with new purchases. When Jim or my father-in-law were around, my mother-in-law acted like the perfect wife and mother straight out of a magazine. Meanwhile, I struggled internally with whether to tell Jim or my father-in-law about my mother-in-law's dual nature. Not wanting to cause them unnecessary worry, I eventually chose to remain silent. However, as time passed, even in gatherings with the family, my mother-in-law openly pushed household chores onto me. Even then, Jim always protected me and spoke up against my mother-in-law. "Mom, why do you always make Sherry do the chores? We agreed to share them." My mother-in-law responded, "Don't be so mad. It's natural for Sherry to handle the chores since she spends time at home, as if it was the most natural thing in the world." Finally, my father-in-law showed his anger. "You aren't working right now either." My father-in-law is 3 years younger than my mother-in-law, making him 59 years old. He is still actively working, despite being close to retirement, and works at a publishing company. He is a person full of kindness and has always been warm to me. Moreover, when it's just the two of us, my mother-in-law often talks about her past glories and her career at a major trading company. She probably doesn't talk about it when the family is around because she doesn't want to hear, "You aren't working now, are you?" It seemed she was proud of her past and felt some superiority because I am a housewife. My mother-in-law enthusiastically repeated stories of her past. Listen, right after graduating from that famous university, I worked at a top company and was really making a mark even as a newcomer. I was so relied upon, and the number of times I was awarded is countless. She said, and I replied, "That's truly wonderful." However, my response only emboldened her to say, "See, you wouldn't understand because you haven't lived a glamorous life like mine. You're perfectly suited for being unemployed because you don't have any special skills." She often looked down on me like that. Although these words irritated me inside, I felt consoled by the fact that my husband and father-in-law were on my side. While my mother-in-law was around, I quickly finished my chores and retreated to my room, reducing the time I spent with her as much as possible. I tried not to pay attention to her boastful stories, and sometimes, when it seemed like she would go on for a long time, I cleverly found excuses to escape back to my room. Recently, I've been quickly retreating to my room as soon as she starts, and even if she seems dissatisfied, I just keep calm. Then, one evening, almost a year after we started living together, my mother-in-law suddenly began talking discontentedly about a luxurious trip her friend, Mrs. Johnson, had. Today, Mrs. Johnson bragged to me. "Mrs. Johnson is your friend, right?" Jim asked. My mother-in-law nodded and began speaking bluntly. The Johnsons went on a fancy trip. They had a private outdoor jacuzzi accessible directly from their room, and the food was exquisite. Listening to this exchange, I simply took the role of a listener. "Is that so?" "I'm envious," my father-in-law commented calmly. To this, my mother-in-law exploded. "Did you hear that?" She bragged about it to me. It felt like she said, "You guys couldn't afford that fancy inn," and it really hurt me. "Why do I have to feel this sad?" she complained. Jim gently said, "Mom, take a deep breath. There's no need to feel so burdened." But my mother-in-law wouldn't listen. "No, you don't understand my feelings. This is the first time I've felt so sad and frustrated." She became furious and suddenly turned her frustration towards me. "The reason our household is struggling financially is because someone isn't employed, you know?" She blamed me. Jim immediately retorted, "Mom, what are you talking about?" But my mother-in-law's anger did not subside. "There's a dead weight here. Don't you have anything to say? Do you realize being a housewife is the same as being unemployed?" She confronted me. Hearing those words, I couldn't hold back any longer. Angry that she, now unemployed herself, was treating me like an unemployed burden, I was at my limit. "You're not working now either, are you?" I counted. "What?" She seemed surprised by my response and then became even angrier. "It's wrong that you're with my precious son. You're unemployed now, and you should live a more independent life. Get out now," she yelled. Both my father-in-law and Jim tried to reason with her, but I asserted my position calmly yet firmly. "Yes, gladly," I responded cheerfully. At that moment, surprise spread across my mother-in-law's face, and she exclaimed, "What?" Jem and my father-in-law were also taken aback by my unexpected reply. Smiling inwardly at their reactions, I quickly stood up, cleared my dishes from the table, and took the first step towards my new life. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law taunted me. "Look, she really is leaving. Jem, you're lucky to get rid of a wife like that." But Jim got angry and scolded her. "Stop it, Mom." My father-in-law also supported me, saying, "You should apologize to Sherry," but my mother-in-law stubbornly refused to apologize. I quietly packed my belongings without anyone interrupting me. Jim watched me anxiously as I left the room. At the last moment, my mother-in-law still seemed to want to say something. "Hey, you, wash your dishes." "And ours too." I naturally ignored her, but I could hear Jim and my father-in-law scolding her throughout the house. The next morning, after I had finished packing, I told Jim something in my room. Then, Jim and I quietly signed the divorce papers. "Mother, this is goodbye." "I will submit the divorce papers," I said calmly. As I left my in-laws' home, I heard my mother-in-law's laughter behind me, but I was satisfied with my decision and left with a smile. My mother-in-law had no idea what was about to happen to her. "It won't go as you think," I muttered to myself as I opened the door to my new life. Then, as I had declared, I submitted the divorce papers to the courthouse, and thus Jim and I were later on officially divorced. 6 months later, my mother-in-law unexpectedly called my mobile phone. As soon as I answered, she started talking excitedly. "I finally got through. I've been trying to reach you for so long." Why haven't I been able to reach you lately? She demanded. Well, I had blocked your calls. We're strangers now, I replied calmly. To be honest, I had blocked her calls to cut off contact with her. I had just unblocked her shortly before. Call blocking? Anyway, listen. I can't find Jim. Where have you hidden my precious Jim? Are you involved in this? Even though you're divorced, do you still have feelings for Jim? She pressed vehemently. Hearing my mother-in-law's voice after a long time, she seemed as lively as ever. Could you please lower your voice a bit? It's hurting my ears. Be quiet. Where are you now? She continued to shout emotionally despite my caution. In stark contrast to her, I informed her calmly. I've built a house and just finished moving in. What? Her momentum was halted suddenly, and she quieted down, but then she gathered her thoughts and started yelling again. What are you talking about? How can you, an unemployed person, have the money for that? A house. Sure, you said something about saving for a home, but there's no way a single, unemployed person like you could afford to build a house. I earn $160,000 a year. The fact I revealed made my mother-in-law gasp in surprise, even over the phone. Actually, I've started streaming videos. I'm a YouTuber now, promoting beauty products and trendy items. I've become popular, and my annual income has reached $160,000, I explained calmly. YouTuber, you? And you earn that much? My mother-in-law could not hide her astonishment. Yes, that's why I stayed in my room. I was focusing on making videos, I added. Of course, it was also to distance myself from my mother-in-law, but since resigning and marrying Jim, I had been deeply engaged in video production, utilizing my editing skills. It had been quite successful from the start, but I never thought I'd earn this much. So, that's it? You were always holed up in your room making videos. Well, yes, for making videos. While escaping from my mother-in-law's bragging was a bigger reason for staying in my room, indeed, I wanted to find as much time as possible for video production. What? That's sly of you. If you were earning so much, you should have told me sooner. I feel terrible. I thought you were just an unemployed nobody and said such awful things. If you're earning that much, it's a different story. You're so mean for keeping such a big secret, Sherry. The moment she learned about my income, my mother-in-law's tone changed as if she had flipped a switch. If you're earning that much, you should give me something too. A fancy hotel trip would be nice, she said. I took a deep breath and replied gently, unfortunately, I earned that money. It's mine. Please use the money you earned at your own prestigious trading company. What? To think you earn so much and still be so stingy. My mother-in-law expressed her dissatisfaction, but I was no longer moved by her words. It surprised me a little. The person who always used harsh words on me was then demanding things so casually. But somewhere in my mind, I thought, that's typical of her, I suppose. To be honest, I have no intention of giving you a single penny. Also, there's the matter with Jem. We are living together now. Wait, what? I thought you two were divorced. Her voice was filled with surprise. Yes, we did separate once, but we remarried. Jem decided to come live in my house this time. We had made that arrangement originally. Really? He moved into your house. The day we left my mother-in-law's house, Jem and I seriously discussed our future. We planned to divorce once, but then Jim would come to my house and we'd start anew. Jim felt very relieved knowing that I wanted to be with him. I'll be staying at my parents' house for a while. I've already talked to them, so Jim, come over when you're ready. Okay, I understand. I really feel sorry for Mom. Jim looked a bit sad, but, along with my father-in-law, always protected me. So, I truly appreciated both of them. Then, Jim lied to my mother-in-law about having a long-term job and came to my house with just the necessities. My mother-in-law was unable to accept what I had told her. Every time I call Jim, it doesn't connect. Could it be, is Jim avoiding my calls too? Why? My mother-in-law was puzzled. Yes, that's correct. Jim decided to distance himself from you. I also used to avoid your calls, but I've unblocked them since we've settled down after moving. I thought you might be worried about Jim, so I wanted to let you know about him. And oh, sorry, but I can't give you our address. We've decided to stay together, so there's no need for you to look for him, I explained in a slightly softer tone. My mother-in-law seemed shocked and stuttered. What? That's... She then suddenly shouted, it's all lies. You must have done something. A bit bewildered in front of such a mother-in-law, Jim then appeared and calmly took the phone. Mom, it's me, he started with a gentle voice. Jim, see, it must be a misunderstanding, right? Did Sherry do something to you? I'll come pick you up, just tell me where you are. My mother-in-law pleaded desperately, but Jim quietly responded, "No, what Sherry is saying is true. We've decided to cut ties with you, Mom. I cannot forgive you for how you had treated her. From now on, you're a stranger to us. I'm sorry. Goodbye." The phone was then handed back to me. "Mother, do you understand Jim's feelings now?" She stammered. "Well, I'm going to hang up now then," I said, and just as I was about to end the call, my mother-in-law suddenly exclaimed, "Wait. I'll accept that we're cutting ties for now. But I still have something to say. Please reconsider the money just one more time." I was utterly baffled that she was still talking about money at this point. "I'm really sorry, my mother-in-law, but we can't give you any more money. It's impossible, especially the fancy hotel reservation you mentioned. So please understand that," I explained as kindly yet clearly as possible. "No, you see, here's the situation. I was enjoying a little shopping with your father's credit card, and it got out, and now I'm limited to a monthly allowance of $300. It disappears in no time." "Oh, really? So that's what happened, huh?" "He did recently mention being worried about the decrease in savings. He saw you coming home from high-end brand shops, so we had a little chat about it. Perhaps that was it." Jem and I always kept in touch with his father, so we knew his concerns well. My father-in-law is truly kind and even helped us with the expenses to start our new life because his wife caused trouble. And lately, he's been worried about the rapidly decreasing savings, so I provided a bit of information about my mother-in-law's shopping habits. Despite not working, she frequently came home with shopping bags from branded stores, which seemed odd to me. "Did you snitch on me to him? Why? He's really angry, has put me on a meager allowance, and insists I record everything. If I don't comply, he's threatening to divorce me. Mother, overspending isn't good, especially without an income. You should appreciate even getting an allowance of $300 a month. You should be grateful to your husband and reflect on your actions," I responded, albeit exasperated, wanting to hear what excuses she might have. I used to be able to buy whatever I wanted, but suddenly having to save after retiring is confusing. When I go shopping with friends, I have to pick something decent, or it looks bad compared to them. "Do you really need to put on such appearances?" I asked. To that, my mother-in-law responded as if it were the most natural thing. "It's not just for show. I used to work at an elite general trading company. That's why branded products suit me. I don't have anything else to discuss with you, Mother. I'm hanging up now." Listening to her incomprehensible claim gave me a headache. With that, I ended the call. As I hung up, I thought I heard my mother-in-law's frustrated voice. Later, my father-in-law told me that my mother-in-law was feeling quite stressed about the new financial arrangement. My mother-in-law had secretly been using my father-in-law's credit card to make expensive purchases. When he found out, he brought up divorce. My mother-in-law cried and begged for forgiveness, but my father-in-law was resolute and did not accept her pleas. Eventually, my mother-in-law had to leave the house and start living in a much simpler apartment. From a life of luxury, she began looking for part-time jobs. However, working under a much younger supervisor became a significant challenge for her, who has high self-esteem. I received several calls from her asking for financial help and complaining about her job. "Sherry, listen. This young supervisor keeps criticizing what I do. Don't do unnecessary things," he says. "How cheeky is that? It's obvious if you just look at my experience. I'd rather you don't call me anymore." But my mother-in-law, endeared, continued, "Come on, help me out a little. Just lend me some money, a small amount will do. You can afford it, right? No, please stop this." When I refused, my mother-in-law started crying dramatically. "That's terrible, Sherry. I can't stand this life anymore. I was supposed to enjoy a fun retirement. Why has it turned out like this? That's your own fault. Until you understand that, nothing will change. Please don't call me anymore." I hung up and blocked my mother-in-law's number again. I don't know what happened to my mother-in-law afterward, but I hope she reflects on her past and changes her ways a little. Meanwhile, my video streaming has been successfully profitable, and together with Jim, we are getting a new business off the ground and securing a stable income. With our savings so far, we are relatively comfortable financially. Also, a new life has begun within me. Our upcoming child is already being blessed by my father-in-law and our families. Jem and I are enjoying our days, preparing to welcome our new family member.